Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about sort of the minimum requirements that you would need to get a rig into a scene, as well as just sort of, generic geometry or something. If you're animating like with Deformers or whatever, what I would sort of qualify as like the minimum amount of stuff that you would need to have to actually start animating in some kind of useful way. Alright, so I'm going to go in my rigging menu and just assume that I'm making some kind of insane looking little, whatever this dude is. It's going to be inherently unfancy and very ugly looking. So here's my janky little rig that I have. I'm just going to go ahead and sort of randomly do a bind skin on this. Great, cool. Alright, so we have the lovely bendy thingy. Alright, so if you are doing a rig specifically, I'm going to talk about these kind of at the same time. So if you're doing a rig specifically, you want to make sure that you at least have enough controllers for the joints that are there, unless you don't plan on animating those joints at a specific time. And again, this is for, minimum, so you don't need to like redo a bunch of stuff while you're animating. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make some real trashy controllers for this. It's gonna be amazing, and by amazing, I mean terrible. Alright, so I'm gonna grab this, and I'm just gonna snap these to each of the joints, and I'm gonna actually go ahead and set up the constraints with these. So actually, I'll show you a few different versions of things you can do. So the minimum that you would want just to have your rig and scene, if you want to sort of move things around, is two things. One, you want to make sure that everything is grouped in your outliner, however you're gonna do. You need some kind of master control. So I use null groups for these because I like null groups for these. And then you want to make sure, first of all, I'm just going to go ahead and I know the appropriate order for those. I'm just going to put them in order because I can. And unless I'm going crazy, master control. Whoop. All right. I just need to double check the order real quick here. Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. I haven't bound any of the attached any of the controls to anything. So I'm going to go ahead and constrain. Alright, so this thing in this case is just going to act, it's probably a weird way to set this up, but this is going to act as my sort of main root control. Like imagine if you had a humanoid character, this would be like the pelvis. The main thing that I move to move the whole character is how I'm treating that. So, yes, I have double transformations. Okay, so quick tidbit. If you ever get this thing, like where if you're trying to move something, the skin flies off, that's double transformations. And that is because I am a dingus and I put the skin under the master control. So once I did that, should be good to go. I can move, scale, rotate this. The scale is weird because I haven't hooked up the rest of the constraints, but yes. So this is pretty much the minimum that you would want to have. So again, organize your stuff as if you were going to organize it for your final rig as best you can. So like group all your stuff, make the master control. The master control is important. This is going to allow you to scale your thing when you put it in the scene so that any animation you do is like at the correct scale. And then have, if you're just doing some blocking animation and you're just sort of like sliding your character around the scene, just have that one controller in here, in this case again, this top control, that will allow you to slide the character around the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I've made a trashy little environment file. So I'm going to just open that up. You can build your environment in a reference as well, but in this case, it's the least fancy thing I've ever done ever, so I didn't do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just file, create reference. I know the hotkey for that. I never use it. It's like the one hotkey I don't use. So I'm going to go ahead and reference this. You can see that our rig is in. It's apparently in a not totally insane scale, which is exciting. So let's say that, and this is especially with like a rig, this is why I like short little things here, because it's just like a lot, like it's literally on every single thing. So if I had like, I've had like file names that are like character animation underscore 30 underscore slashing attack underscore version 97. And that is not a thing that I want to look at in the outliner, because then I'd have to like open it up to here to actually find that. So it's completely just a visibility thing. But anywho, so I'm going to go ahead and just be like, okay, like let me scale this in my scene, and maybe move this I'm just going to say for some reason that this is, I sort of picture this being like a bar, so we're just going to have this dude standing on top of the bar like a weirdo. And then I'm going to go ahead and just set a few keyframes. For some reason, it's been like crazy laggy right now, and I really don't know why. Alright, so just like casually walking across a bar like a weirdo, and maybe like rotating for some odd reason. I'm going to turn on auto key because I like auto key. Alright, so I'm going to save this, and then I'm like, okay, you know, I did my rig, I did, you know, enough to do an animatic or like block an animation, now I need to go back and like do other things. Alternately, I've found broken stuff in my rig, as happens. So I'm going to grab this and just go ahead and finish constraining the all the controllers to each other, to the joints. So now it should behave better with this. It should, unless I'm going insane, also fix that. Alright, well, scaling is still weird. I'm probably setting up my outliner wrong because it's been a while since I've rigged stuff. I always forget about the outliner structure. But anywho, it's probably also, this doesn't make sense. Like, this makes no sense. Wait, sorry. Weird. Oh, okay, I'm an idiot. Okay, so that's actually good. Good to know. Cough, cough. So I'm going to go ahead, set that back to 1. Alright, so I've done a few things to this file, and I'm also just going to, this is actually something that I don't recommend doing, so you should be, if you're going to make changes to your model, you need to unbind the skin first, otherwise it will cause you a world of headaches. So I'm just going to go ahead and like randomly add some like ridges or something weird on this because I can. And that's not what I wanted. Alright, cool. And then I will just deselect these dudes. Great. And be like, yay! Great. It's the prettiest thing I've ever made. Alright, rebind that. There is also skin weights if you're going to have to be doing this. You can save them, but I do not care. This is a 5-second demonstration, so I'm not doing that. But you should totally make sure that your object is UV'd, and you save out your skin weights. If you're going to unbind it, it'll save you some time. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead, save this again, and then pop back into my environment files. So, we should see a few things. One, obviously, there's been a geometry change, as per the changes that I made to the geometry. You'll remember from before, hopefully, that there was a little bit of like weirdness when I scaled the character, where it was like sort of floating. We fixed that in the original file, so it's fixed here. You can see I also, when I was making changes to the file, moved the joints in the outliner. That's carried over. So like I said, this is a good way to actually like fix rigging errors, and why I always recommend fixing rigs. Why I always recommend referencing rigs, because it's really hard, especially when you're first doing rigging, to like set it up perfectly, and like a lot of times you don't find little errors until you start animating. And if you've animated just in the final file with your rig in it or whatever, there's no good way to go back and change that. It's always good to just have a separate file with a finished rig and be done with it. So that's pretty much the, I guess, referencing with rigging. The only other thing that I would sort of highly recommend doing is saving versions of your file, right? So what I did is I basically had this rig file, and I don't want to only have this one file, because if I do something stupid, I can't go back to previous versions. If that file gets corrupted, I'm royally screwed. And I've had that happen. It happens like 3 times every time I teach a class with rigging. Like, something breaks and they have to, like, people will have to redo everything because they don't have previous versions. For the love of God, save multiple versions of everything. So what I normally do a lot of times is I will just call the, you know, my final file will just be called rig or something like that. But if I'm going to make changes to it, I'll call this like rig version 2. That's not typing. Version 2, cool. Do, you know, whatever I'm going to do here. I'm just going to do some trashy, like throwing in cubes or whatever. And then I will go back and I will save this file, and then I will overwrite my other file, my original rig file. So basically what this does is if you have multiple of these sort of floating version files, if you've overwrote your file with something stupid that you didn't mean, you still have those other files that you can go back and just, you know, save over the rig file. So it's a nice way to sort of like version back, if that makes any sense. Let me actually I'll show you that real quick. I'm not sure if I described that in any kind of logical way. Let's throw in some more icosahedrons. All right, so I'm going to save this, and I will call this rig version 1. I'll be like, all right, cool. We have this rig version 1, and let's say that it turns out that like these icosahedrons and stuff I put in was terrible. I've broken the rig and done something really weird. What I can do is then open up just like the rig2 file. I don't know why I named these backwards. That was strange. And then I can use this to either start another little branch of revisions or just overwrite the rig file being used. Because that's all that the reference editor cares about, is that one rig file or whichever file you select when creating the reference. So again, I highly recommend doing this. I say this like 30 times every quarter, and I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for, you know, if someone just does everything in a single file and it gets corrupted or broken or lost or whatever. Always save versions. So that's really all I have to say about that. I think that's pretty much everything you would need for referencing. It turns out that the process for rigging and deformers, I guess, is fairly similar, where if you were going to set up a deformer, you would just want to basically like have the geometry in a reasonable state for like whatever you're going to work with, and then, you know, set up the deformers in sort of the position where you want them on the body, right? So if you had like let's duplicate this. Let me duplicate that and then unlock these. It's not muted. Where am I going? Unlock selected. There we go. So like, let's say you had this, and then you did modeling, deform, bend. So if you had a bend deformer, and you knew you wanted to like animate the character like this, but maybe you wanted the bend to start at the ground or something like that. You're doing, I don't know, like a floppy, some kind of weird floppy thing like this. You would want to set that deformer up in the appropriate location on the character, because if you start animating it up here, that's going to affect then your animations in the final file. It's going to look really weird once you actually move it down. So I think that's pretty much really all I have to say about referencing. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, so for basically just set everything up. If you're going to be animating it, make sure that it's set up in the appropriate scale and or outliner organization and or location. Location mostly for just like joints and, you know, deformers, stuff like that. For the rig, you do need the extra step of make sure, for the love of God, that you have this master controller in here, because if you have to scale stuff, it's going to be a sad day. Never key your joints. Take the extra 5 seconds, throw a controller on there. It's going to make your life a million times easier. That's pretty much it.